Absolutely. Here you go.
Thank you very much. I kind of have a lot to say. I flew all the way out from Connecticut, so I hope you don't mind here. Anyway, the very first thing is we want to thank David Greenwald so much for the Judicial Watch of Yolo County. He's one of the bravest people we know. He's passionate. He really cares about what he's doing. He's made a big difference in the justice system. He's not afraid to take on those problems in the legal system that really need to be addressed. So I thank you so much for that, David. I'm here tonight. I represent over 1,000 advocates for Ajay who believe that Ajay Dev is innocent of the crimes that he's been wrongfully convicted and sentenced to 378 years. A lot of people say, how do you know? How do you know that he's innocent? Well, most rape cases have no witnesses. They're always a he said, she said case. But Ajay's case is very different because Ajay his accuser claims that she was raped. Well, there's so many people with firsthand knowledge. She claims she was raped 750 times, 3 times a week for 5 years. And some of those rapes, she said, happened in the presence of other people. So for example, she said she claims that she was raped while in the same bed as her adopted mother, Peggy, slept right next to her. And Peggy testified, absolutely not. That did not happen. She claimed that she was raped when they slept over her aunt and uncle's house. And both the aunt and uncle testified she's never ever slept at their house. She claimed she was raped in the living room while her cousins laid next to her. She was in between the two of them, shoulder to shoulder. They said, no way, impossible that could happen. Now people will say, okay, these people are family. They're gonna lie for him. Well, let me continue because there's a lot more. She said she was raped when she went to family friend's house. And the family friends testified and said, the house is very small, the doors were open, an adult was up all night with medical issues. No way. She claimed that Ajay was the only one she had sexual relations with. Yet her boyfriend testified that they had sexual relations once a week. Now, 750 times she said she was raped, and she testified that Ajay didn't use contraceptives. Yet the only pregnancies happened when, in a very narrow point of time, during the time she was having sexual relations with her boyfriend. Now, how does that happen? 750 times, no contraceptives, no pregnancies, except for that narrow point of time. She said, his accuser said she never brought young men to the house while her parents were at work. Yet the neighbors testified, oh yes, she did, and she closed the curtains when she did. She claimed that he took naked pictures of her and put them on their computer. And you know what? There was never any naked pictures found anywhere. Just a minute. His accuser claimed that she was raped 750 times, now 3 times a week for 5 years, and yet no one saw any emotional or physical trauma at all. In that time, her doctor examined her 9 times and saw no trauma. She had a full psychoanalysis done by a social worker, and they saw no signs of trauma. Her teachers saw no signs, her friends, her family saw no signs. Now think about that. 750 rapes and there's no signs of emotional or physical trauma? That doesn't even make sense. And keep in mind too that her teachers, her doctor, her social worker, they are all mandated reporters. If they suspect anything, they need to say something, and nobody did. Now over those 5 years, there was hundreds of private emails and texts between the two of them, between Ajay and his accuser. And not one of them had any kind of evidence that anything wrong happened. There was nothing mentioned about any sexual relationships, nothing mentioned about anything like that. In fact, she had a cell phone, she had email, she had social media, nothing. You go through anything over those years and there's not one hint. And nobody is that good to hide in all those private conversations and have nothing show up. Now you might be wondering, why would somebody make up a story like this? Why would they make up these allegations? Well, when she was 16 years old, Peggy and Ajay brought her from Nepal to America for a better education and better job opportunities. Well, unfortunately, things didn't happen as planned. She failed her classes, she lost her job, she hooked up with the wrong crowd, and the problems just grew bigger and bigger. Eventually what happened is her relationship with Ajay and Peggy deteriorated. And she was very afraid that she was going to be sent back to Nepal permanently, and that's why she made these allegations to stop that from happening. Now, a few months later, she went home for her sister's wedding, and while she was there, she was convicted of passport fraud and falsifying birth certificates, and she lost her ability to come back into the United States. So Ajay's case was her ticket back to this country. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how did he get convicted and sentenced to 378 years? And that's a good question, because the detective didn't really do much investigating. He didn't talk to the family, her friends, her doctor, her teachers. He didn't talk to anybody who knew the two of them. He just took her word for it, and even when she contradicted herself, he didn't question that. In fact, one of the jurors blogged after the trial that her testimony was pretty hard to swallow. What the detective did do is he did a pretext phone call, as David talked about a little bit before, where he was trying to entrap Ajay into admitting his guilt. Now, the phone call was 50 minutes. And in that 50 minutes, Ajay directly denied those allegations 27 times. But the phone call was in both Nepali and English because they both spoke those languages. The English part of the transcript is very clear and easy to understand, but the Nepali part was very confusing. And here's what the problem was. The court did not give the jury a certified transcript from a certified court translator. As David mentioned to you, they allowed his accuser to be the translator, and then the court told the jury that they could rely on that translation. Now, of course, the defense objected. The defense had a translator, and the translator got to come out, but it was 7 weeks later after the transcript was read line by line to the jury. And the defense translator made a point of saying, well, let me explain to you what went wrong. What went wrong was there was one small section in the translation, in the Nepali part, that was inaudible. You couldn't really hear what was happening in that part. And guess what she inserted there? An admission of guilt. Completely made it up, put it in, very convenient. Let's put it there. Now, our translator said it's impossible. Obviously, he couldn't hear the whole thing, but he could hear the beginning sound, which was a hard K sound. And there is no word that means sex in Nepali that starts with that sound. But again, the problem was the jury heard this 7 weeks later after they read line by line the transcript. Now, tonight's about prosecutorial misconduct, and there definitely was some in Ajay's case too. During closing arguments, the prosecutor, Steve Mount, told the jury that he saw Ajay write a note where he admitted his guilt during the preliminary hearing, and he gave it to his lawyer. Now, the defense lawyer objected right away, and Judge Fall overruled him. But there was no note. There was never a note with evidence of guilt at all. But the problem is the jury heard Steve Mount tell them that there was. It was terrifying to watch a paid servant of the people directly, blatantly lie to the jury about a note with an admission of guilt that did not ever happen. And all this is in the transcripts, you can read it, and actually every one of you has in front of you a card that says Seeking Justice for the Innocent. We've put Ajay's entire appellate brief and reply brief on that website, and this is claim number 8. You can read all the details about this misconduct. Then Steve Mount goes on with the closing arguments, spends about 90% of his argument on the pretext phone call, talking about that insertion that the accuser put into play. But when he does this, he talks in the first person as if he is Ajay Dev. Now, Ajay Dev did not testify, but Steve Mount was Ajay Dev in the way he was testifying for him. He was telling people what Ajay was thinking, what his motives were, what was going on in the room where Ajay was in the house, and obviously he wasn't there. And he was inserting incriminating statements that weren't even part of the transcript. Excuse me. Anyway, we have a story also in Advocates for Ajay if you want to hear about it. But what I want to say is Ajay right now, his case is before the 3rd Appellate Court. And he's been there 5 years waiting for the appeal process to happen. In all that time, he has not been able to touch or hold his two young sons, ages 4 and 6. The 4-year-old was born months after he was convicted. He has never been able to hold his son. Excuse me. Advocates for Ajay, we have marched many, many times. We have done petitions with over 1,000 signatures. We have written hundreds of letters. We've done demonstrations. We've done interviews on radio, television, newspapers, anything we can think of to help this man come home. And my hope is that there's somebody here in this room tonight who can step forward, who can give us some help, who can give us some support. I know that most of you here support David Greenwald and the work he's done. And as David told you, he's read extensively. We've had people that have read those 10,000 transcripts, pages of transcripts. Anyway, I just want to say thank you so much to David Greenwald for this honor. And I want to thank you all for your patience in listening to my story tonight, or our story tonight. And please pray for us that Ajay comes home soon.
It's always tough for me to hear about his sons, because I have young children not much older than his youngest, and I can't even imagine not being able to hold them. So that may be the worst part of all the horror that this family has had to go through.